Okay, calm down.
Can you talk a little bit more about the proxy war in Ukraine? It's something that I think a lot of people who I usually agree with politically, there's kind of a split on the left, I would say. For some people on the left, the whole role of NATO or the way that the United States, I would say, provoked this. I'm not justifying what Putin did, but I think it was provoked and it was avoidable. Chris Hedges, your friend, our friend,
Yes.
said that was
Yes.
unjustifiable, but totally avoidable, and it was provoked. What do you have to say to the people who don't see it that way, who just say it's all Putin, it has nothing to do with what the United States did, and we should be, if we want to end the war, that means that Putin has to get out?
Yes, yes. I mean, first for myself, I always begin with the suffering. I begin with the suffering of the precious Ukrainian brothers and sisters. And I begin with the fact that the invasion and occupation is indeed a crime against humanity. And in that sense, it is unjustifiable. At the same time, I go on to say that it's a proxy war between two empires, a wounded empire, which is the Russian Empire with its own forms of repression and domination, and the mightiest empire in the history of the world, which is the United States. And that back again, when they are promised, the Russian Empire is promised that the American Empire will not move 1 inch, and we do. And we know empires behave like empires. So if there were Russian or Chinese missiles in Mexico and Canada, the US government would blow them into smithereens, because empires behave like empires. And that therefore we should not overlook the suffering of the Ukrainian brothers and sisters. We should not overlook the context in which it was an actual provocation, pushing a Russian gangster named Putin against the wall. Gorbachev would probably do something very similar, because he was head of a Russian empire too. And he was completely categorically against moving 1 inch toward Russia. Now we got 14 former Soviet countries as part of NATO, you see. So that we have to be willing to tell a full-blooded truth. So we can be against Russian imperialism, against American imperialism, take responsibility, Putin, in terms of a criminal invasion, but also recognize you were pushed against the wall, and yet don't overlook the suffering of the Ukrainian brothers and sisters. And I would add, the courageous Russians who are going to jail this very moment, minimum 7 years in prison against the war. In that sense, it's very much like your precious mother's boyfriend, Mara, right? In the American Empire, I'm going to jail. I'm not going to be a part of it. Now in Russia, you got a whole, what is now 20 some thousand Russians have done that. We don't want to overlook that, because we don't want to look at Russia as in some homogeneous entity. You got tremendous struggles going on inside of Russia, and we want to stay in contact with those Russian brothers and sisters. So what do I call for? Stop the war, cease fire, sit down with Chinese elites, Turkish elites, Ukrainian elites, US elites, and say, we are going to come up with not just a diplomatic response, but we're going to make sure we minimize any of the suffering, because we're headed toward a nuclear exchange.
And the media is seemingly impatient. I always remember that press conference where all these journalists in the room were urging a no-fly zone. They were asking for a no-fly zone, basically.
No.
And when you have the Pentagon being less belligerent than the news media, that's a scary,
Isn't that
scary moment. Yeah.